We could have put on a much better performance than we certainly did here to end this particular season. I don't want to talk about my contract right now. I'm devastated. What did you take away from that?
Yeah, Coach T was bummed out, okay? And in that moment, he didn't want to talk about the future because I don't even know if he knows what the future is, because I don't know if anybody knows what the future is, because there's been rumblings of him walking away and stuff like that. Now the team has come out, like Cam Harry would come out and talk like that doesn't seem like that's going to happen. But that's probably not the time to ask Coach T that question. If I had, he's gonna have an end of. Good
question, Al Brook.
Sure. But he always has an end of season press conference too. That's not gonna be the last time that they get to talk to Coach T. But yesterday in a whole, there was a couple plays. The Pickens fumble, which they immediately scored. The next play on a seam route to Kincaid, and then the pick in the end zone, which was. Just unfortunate, and that's 14 points right there. Other than that, I thought the boys played hard. It was, that was just, like, you score there, 14-7. They cut it to 24-17 in the fourth quarter, but Josh Allen was just kind of too much, and that was kind of the whole thing about the moving the game. The Steelers fans kind of knew when you move the game and you give Josh Allen versus, even though Mason didn't play bad, just that one play there. And, like, as a season as a whole, they were 10-7, but everyone knew kind of that there was never a chance they were winning a Super Bowl with that team. And that's kind of been the case since 2017 when we lost the AFC Championship to the Patriots and then Ben got hurt. It's mediocrity right now, and we don't know where we're going to go. And I tweeted this morning, I have no idea what's going to happen with the Steelers, but I know exactly what's going to happen with the Steelers. I assume Coach T's back next year, and I assume Kenny's going to be starting. Okay. And I'm actually more confident in the offense right now than I am the defense, which says a lot.
Well, T.J. Watt didn't play, so that can't be how you exactly view the defense. T.J. Watt led the NFL in sacks this year. He's a game wrecker. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So whenever he's done on the field, the Pittsburgh Steelers do not do well. That is just kind of classic
1-11.
Pittsburgh Steelers without T.J. Watt, which T.J. Watt should potentially go in and renegotiate another contract.
Yeah,
might have a little bit of leverage, even though that's not what it's always about in this entire thing. But whenever you say exactly what's going to happen. Coach T is going to be back.
Yep.
Kenny Pickett's going to be the starter and everything. Jay Glazer's saying that Mike Tomlin might step down and might step away and might take a breather. Or the conversation that Mike Tomlin might end up on another team, might get traded away from the Pittsburgh Steelers because he is still under contract if he wanted to coach, which leads me to 9-year NFL vet Darius J. Butler, D-Butch. I talked to Stephen A. Smith this morning on First Take, and I said, because he said the Cowboys' collapse is obviously much worse than what the Eagles did.
Sure.
Eagles go 10-1, then 1-6 down the stretch. Embarrassing for the Philadelphia Eagles, to be honest. That's not cool. And how Jason Kelce got sent out is the exact opposite of the type of player and human that Jason Kelce was, which kind of sucks. And how the city of Philadelphia is.
Yeah,
but that's just brutal. That kind of sucks the way that whole thing went. But he said the Cowboys obviously was devastating because that wasn't supposed to happen. At home, they were supposed to win. Now, Mike McCarthy might leave. So I asked him, I said, are you firing Mike McCarthy and hiring Bill Belichick to be your head coach down there? And he said, you only fire Mike McCarthy if you can get Bill Belichick or Mike Tomlin. I had no idea that Mike Tomlin's name is now being added to the Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll, Jim Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin potentially being available. Now, what does Stephen A. Smith know? A lot more than we do. He is a Steelers fan. He's been around the media a long time. I assume he has connections in some places. Maybe Mike Tomlin is saying, I need somewhere fresh. This has been mediocrity. This is what the fans keep saying. He's been above 500 with a bad team. What do you think Tomlin's saying? Like, well, yeah, we've been above 500 with a bad team. Imagine if I went to a team that was good. Is that a conversation worth having at this point, or are we way too soon to the season's end?
I don't think that's a conversation worth having. Now, obviously, people, respect Jay, and obviously Jay knows. And if he says it holds some weight. But I don't see, if you're going to move on from Mike McCarthy, I wouldn't say Mike Tomlin. I wouldn't even go the Mike Vrabel route. I would either go Bill or probably Harbaugh. Like, those would probably be the only guys I would fire Mike for. You got to the playoffs, got exits, the 3 12-win seasons, whatever. Was a terrible collapse, but that Eagles, that was terrible to watch. And we've seen some teams, Bills change their coordinator, Steelers. You've seen offensively, they did some things at the end of the season, kind of turn it around. In Philly, you go to Matty P, and I feel like it got almost worse, but the guys aren't tackling, they aren't communicating, no pressure up front if you're not blitzing. It was just a bad ball to watch.
And Jalen Hurts and Goddard getting into it there on the sideline. This isn't the only time that Jalen Hurts has gotten into it with a teammate during this entire collapse. Dom DeSandro is back on the sideline.
Yes.
And now it's Dom DeSandro over before we even really get a chance to enjoy the big Italian being back on the sideline. Now, this is not taken away from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' hell of a game.
Yeah. Great game.
Hell of a game.
Great win. NFC South champs obviously doing it. Nobody from the NFC East still remains.
Whoa.
Remember how strong the NFC East was?
Oh, yeah.
Remember how soft the AFC South was?
Oh, yeah.
Well, sorry about it. Just steamrolled an AFC North opponent in the Browns. And then now they're rolling into the Baltimore Ravens, who best team in football combined for the entirety of it. So the AFC North still represented. Everybody else says that the NFC South stunk all year. And I think the records have proved that they did. But then all of a sudden they get a massive win in the playoffs. The NFC South still alive. And with that defense, now they'll rip a face. They will rip a face mask
For sure.
on a tush push. They will certainly do it. And Vita Vea will be bigger, stronger, faster, and more dynamic than you are until the day that he dies. This is fascinating. Now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the only team to have stopped the tush push twice. Okay, they're also the only team that stopped tush push once. They have the recipe. The recipe is get Vita Vea and the boys up underneath or up inside of the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line. And then you just grab Jalen Hurts' head, and they say you grab the head, snake will follow. He just rip that thing straight back.
Anything goes on a goal line.
Not a bad play. I mean, I don't know why anybody else hasn't been doing this. What we need to do is get our hands on Jalen Hurts' head or face.
Bingo.
And then just break his neck.
Yank him.
It might be fun to get pushed until your neck's getting right on, but nonetheless, the Buccaneers get a big win. This Philadelphia Eagles team, though, they're talking about wholesale changes. I just watched a video that was posted on the internet of some Philadelphia Eagles fan traveled down to Tampa Bay to watch that game last night, and S. Sirianni was walking off field with Big Dom Sandro. Guy threw his entire bucket of popcorn on him.
Yeah.
Threw an entire bucket. He said, "Get out of here, Nick." They're ready for him to
Expensive popcorn.
see ya. 1-6 down the stretch. He was just in the Super Bowl last year. Easy come, easy go. They're saying get Sirianni the hell out of there, con man.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I think if you have a 2-year run, you could even say 3-year run, because when he first came in, they really didn't even know who the quarterback was. Still ended up going to the playoffs and eventually lost to the Bucs, actually. But if you just look at like the offense, sure, the defense couldn't tackle anybody for the entire game, and that was tough. And they had a good little quarter from halfway through the second to halfway through the third where they were playing decent. But I think like A.J. Brown, it shows how damn good he is at football, because he clearly was the focal point of that entire offense. And for Devonta Smith to still, he set the single game record for the Eagles last night in receiving yards, and they still got killed. Like, they had nobody else after Devonta Smith, and Julio Jones gets concussion. But like the offensive line,
I thought he broke a rib, by the way. Julio, with the way that I thought it was a shoulder rib.
Looked bad.
And then they take him in there. I guess it was, I mean, I thought maybe Julio Jones was going to, hello, how you doing? This was a Julio Jones moment all of a sudden.
Bingo.
Are you kidding me? And then all of a sudden, that hit was Jones, I think, made the hit?
Yeah.
Perfect shoulder.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Revenge game, too. Like, I thought Julio was going to come in, used to play for Tampa, come back in, score a couple touchdowns like he did late in the season. But their offensive line, they were getting blitzed all night, and there was just nothing. There's nothing to be done about it. And this is only 4-man pressure, and they're still getting home. Like, I thought the offensive line was kind of what we hung our hat on the entire season, at least the last couple of years when it came to the Eagles. And the Bucs defense was just absurd. They played so well. Yeah, they were killing them. So it was just shocking start to finish for Philly. And when they, score that other touchdown to go down by a touchdown, you think maybe they might have a little bit of a run in them, but the Bucs defense was just too much.
In the last 4 games, this is an interesting stat from Hembo, Jalen was blitzed 68 times, not blitzed 55 times. So that Bosa comment, right? Bosa said, here's the blueprint. He'll look at the rush. So if you can't create it with 4, let's go ahead and create a rush and see what happens with Jalen Hurts. That's something he's going to have to nip in the bud. That is going to have to be something that Jalen Hurts is going to have to figure out.
Yeah, I honestly don't. I mean, obviously missing A.J. Brown is huge. I don't think Hurts played, that terrible. All things considered, they definitely were sending gas, and even when they weren't sending, a blitz, it was some type of simulated pressure with bringing a DB, maybe a D-line. Vita Vea even dropped out a couple times. So Todd Bowles, he's definitely going to mix it up. I wish he would have got a pick.
Awesome.
That would have been sweet. But Todd Bowles definitely mixed it up. I didn't think Hurts was, I guess, the big issue here. It was just that, offensively, obviously Baker had a huge night. He could have had 175 more yards with some drops. Evans had a drop. Otten had a drop down the middle. It was just the gaps, the seams, nobody on the same page defensively. And it's surprising to see that with all those veterans on Philly's side, especially in a wild card weekend. Like, what are we doing here?
Eagles allowed 1,290 yards to close out season versus Arizona, Giants, and Bucks.
Not great.
That's 124 more than their collective season average. Okay, so towards the end, their defense just kind of absolutely fell apart. Eagles linebackers and safeties allowed a 102.8 rating in coverage this season. Yeah. And Hembo, who is a Eagles fan, said how we can't just ignore entire position groups anymore. That's what Hembo said. Obviously, he's calling for some stuff. Eagles yards per game on RPOs last season, 88.1. Mm-hmm. This season, 48.6. That's about 700 yards left on the field year over year. Okay, that's from Hembo. And then last year, Hurts' average snap to pass time was 2.76 seconds. This season, fourth slowest, 3.01. So he's obviously thinking. And yesterday, Eagles pass to run ratio was 3-1. So Brian Johnson, I think, will want to throw a little bit more.
Yeah.
Shane Steichen, though, is obviously a little bit different. Shane Steichen was tasked with, remember, building Jalen Hurts into becoming a franchise NFL quarterback last year. They certainly did that. They had massive success. They make it all the way to the Super Bowl. Then Shane Steichen is plucked out here to Indianapolis. He's
a great coach.
He's everything.
Yeah,
unreal.
He is everything that they kind of made him out to be. Him not being in that building, obviously huge. Gannon not being in that building is huge. I think ultimately in the end, you saw a transition period, even though it wasn't a brand new head coach, it was a transition period for the offense and for the defense. And they go 10-1, that kind of disguises it at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And then it doesn't show up until it shows up. 1-6 down the stretch, everybody got exposed seemingly.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is like even when they were winning and they were 10-1, we were kind of saying the
ugly.
Yeah, it's like, hey, the writing was kind of on the wall, but you ignore it because they were winning. But then when things started to go bad, it's like everything went bad. And even last night, like to D-But's point, like I don't think Hurts played terrible, but when you watch what the defense is doing and the expectation is like, hey, every time we go on the field now, like we have to score. Because they were too, and it wasn't like the Bucs at points were methodical, but it was like that Trey Palmer touchdown. It's like they have him pinned down for like an 8-yard gain, and then he gets out of 2-3 tackles, and it's a 54-yard touchdown. And it was just weird. Like we saw the Goddard stuff with him and Jalen but just like from the body language, it looked like when they were down 16-9 and after they didn't get the tush push for the touchdown, it was like, oh, this game's over. Like we can't win this game. And then obviously they just continued to kind of fall apart, but it did kind of seem like the entire year, like all the makings of like disaster were there, but they were just finding a way to win. So we ignore it, and obviously when you get to the playoffs, like you can't ignore that stuff.
I mean, there is a stat normally the Super Bowl loser, like I can't remember the exact percentage, doesn't make the playoffs normally, and they did have that 10-1 start, so there is a chance they could bounce back, I guess. But the one in, like we were talking about, Cowboys collapse versus Eagles collapse. Cowboys was one game. Like you can have a bad Sunday, and was it the worst Sunday of the year to have a bad game? Yeah. The Eagles had a terrible 2 months.
Yeah.
2 months. No Dom DeSandro on the sideline for most of that. And I think last night as I was watching it, it almost, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Mm-hmm. I just assumed Don DeSandro being back there would be good. There's also the holy hell, Don DeSandro's back on our sideline, which, kind of had the boys a little tight. Probably had the boys a little bit banged up there. But what do you think it is? Booger McFarland put out a tweet this morning, and as I was reading it, I was like, yeah, we said this about the Bills earlier. So the Bills early in the season, they looked nothing like what we thought the Bills were going to look like. They looked dejected. Their moxie was out. There was no real anything that seemed like this team gets along with each other, like this team likes each other.